So okay, what I'd like to do now is to bring a bit more warmth to the face. We've obviously added some cooler colours like the violet grey, and at the moment it is looking a bit drab basically. Although his face, this particular line, you know, is quite muted, there is still some warmth within his hair. So I'm going to start building up some of the warmer tones now to balance it out a little. So I'm going to use a brown ochre 50% luminance pencil, and I'm just going to obviously look at my reference photo and go over some of these tones just to bring out some more of these kind of browny yellowy colours. So again, I'm just washing with a very light pressure in the direction of the hair. You can obviously, to intensify the colour, instead of pressing harder like I said before, you can obviously just go over the same area a few times. Remember to keep your pencil quite sharp. As you can see, it's really just starting to add something, this pencil colour. That's the thing when you're working with pencils and building up the layers. You know, if you're finding perhaps something's looking a bit too warm, or perhaps it's gone a certain colour tone, like too yellow or too blue, you can add subsequent layers to kind of counteract and give you a bit more balance. So don't panic if a picture's looking a bit too purple or a bit too yellowy brown. We can add more layers to rectify this a little bit, particularly obviously if you keep your layers very light. If you're pressing harder, then this obviously makes it more difficult to achieve. This patch just above the eye, I'm going to stroke just simply because there are some lighter hairs showing through there. I don't want to lose them. Now this patch here is generally more of a brown colour, but I'm just going to add a tiny bit just to bring some unity to the picture. Again, if you find you've gone a bit dark, don't panic. You may be able to save it. We'll talk about that a bit later on, about how to fix a problem if one occurs, and how to add. Might want to add a few more highlights back in. I will show you how to do that later. So don't panic if you make a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's something we can probably use to our advantage, because there's tips and tricks of different things that you can do. As long as you use the light layers, that's the key here. Making sure you've got light layers. this cheek, obviously, again, generally this is the area where I'm doing more individual strokes, just to allow those lighter colours to shine through a little bit more. Okay. Add a little bit around the top of the muzzle and sides. And add just a few bits here, not too much because that's lighter. And just a tiny bit here. This is more yellow, so I don't want to put too much there yet. So, I'd like to add some yellow ochre now. Now I have 3 different types of yellow ochre here, and I'm just going to show you on my spare bit of paper. As you can see, this is my little note list. I've got them in different places. I'm just going to just show you here that they're not all exactly the same tone. So, this is the Light Fast. Okay, and then this is the Luminance, which is more of a brighter, and that's more muted. And then you've got the Prismacolor, which is more or a brighter orange. So you can see, although they're all called yellow ochre, they're all completely different. So for the purposes of what I would like to achieve at the moment, I'm going to start off using the slightly muted one just to begin with, and see whether that gives us enough warmth, and then if I find we need more, then I'm going to add some of the Prismacolor one. So we'll start with the Light Fast first. Move that out of the way. Okay, so again, I'm basically just going to go over, washing over where we've just put the previous colour. Again, light pressure, 1, 2. By kind of washing, you, although I'm generally following the lines of the hair growth, in places if it's looking a little bit like you can see too much white coming through, I do sometimes work in just very small little circles, just to help kind of blend the underlying colours together a little bit. Particularly obviously if it's in an area where we don't need to see individual hairs. These are more just like big clumps of hair. Again, I shall go around the whole face because we want to have some unity to it. See here, it's really starting to add some warmth into the lion. You can see as well, see where we're building up the layers, because we've got different areas of colour underneath and different mixes of overlays. That's where you start creating the depth, because it's not all one colour or a series of colours. It's because you've got bits overlapping, and some individual strokes showing through. That's how you really get the depth to your picture. Add a bit down this darker patch here. Again, I mean, as you can see, overlaying this colour created a completely different colour to the one that we actually saw on the white paper. So that's also something to be very mindful of when choosing your colours. You can always obviously test on your piece of paper, build up your layers on a piece of paper, so you can test them over the top if you're not sure with your colours. Obviously the more time you spend drawing and the more you get to know individual colours, the easier it gets just to know which colour to automatically reach for. So I want to add a bit just on his cheek here. Again, we're on that kind of stroking it in stage on this side with those more individual marks. Remember, you can always come back if you find, obviously, at the end as you're building up an area you think, oh, actually I haven't put enough dark in here, well, that bit should be lighter. Then, you know, we will be going back with the next layer, so don't panic. Doing some of my washing in here, because again, these patches here, you can't, you know it's hair, but obviously it's just blended in a bit more. No, was in this area, although it's light, I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow because it's more of a yellowy cream. And the same on this side, just add a bit. Okay. So that was the yellow ochre. Now, obviously, it has warmed it up, has made it a bit more yellow. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of the Prismacolor yellow ochre, just in a few places. Just, I don't want to go too crazy with it. Just in a few of the places that I'd like to sort of just bring to the forefront a little bit more. Particularly in areas perhaps where it's changing to create more of the structure of the face. Again, while we're obviously using the reference photo, use your common sense. Don't be a complete slave to it. A picture does not tell you everything. It is just a moment in time. So if you know something should be slightly different, then obviously you use that knowledge. There we are. Now, obviously I did want to add more yellow to it to start brightening it up and bringing the yellow tones out, but the face is also, his particular face isn't yellow, it's more of a pinky yellow. So before it gets too yellow, obviously I'm going to think about perhaps how can I, add that pinky warmth to it. So I think what I'm going to try is I'm going to start by using my burnt burnt sienna 10% again that we used a bit earlier on, just to keep the balance between bringing out the yellow within the face, but obviously we don't want it too yellow. It's a pinky yellow. So again, it's just you go do some yellows and then some more pink or purpley colours, and you keep working them up to create the depth in the picture until obviously you reach a level where you're happy with that balance and that depth. So starting at the top again, I'm just gonna wash over just gently again, just very lightly. Again, going over darker areas, mid-tone pinky areas. I seem to have lost, there's a very dark patch just here above his eye, which I've not yet focused on, so I'm just going to mark that back in just so I don't lose it. Perhaps focus on that bit next. Again, around the eye you can see individual hairs a little bit more. If not, we'll do a bit more work around the eyes in a minute. And look at some of those particularly darker tones, just to start adding in some of those. Keep checking your reference photo. Don't just assume you know where something is. I'm going to put a little bit here, it's not too pinky though, but then as you work down around the muzzle and the mouth area, then add a bit more in there. And again, I don't really want to go pink there, I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to add a bit into this side though, start building up that real dark depth, and then around this eye. Again, in the nose, just a little. I need to start adding in some greyer tones here within the nose, because that's quite a grey area there. Just a tiny bit in there. Okay. As you can see, his face is slowly starting to take some shape. What we obviously need to do next is look at some of these particularly darker little pieces within his face. We'll focus on those next to bring those up a little bit, and then I also want to add in a bit of the grey around his nose and under his eyes, and then we can start to see what areas to work on next. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on some of these darker little bits here that we've just talked about, and for this I've got a burnt ochre 50% Luminance pencil I'm going to start with. So again, using light pressure, probably about pressure 2, I'm going to just lightly stroke on in some of these darker areas. Again, just be careful here because you have got some lighter hairs just kind of going into there. There isn't a hard line. Just a touch around the middle of his forehead. And keep looking at your reference photo to see where you think this would obviously be a good colour to add a little bit. There's a patch there. Let's add a little bit. The odd little strand here and there. To put just a little bit. If you look on the picture, it's got a little bit of this nice kind of colour, pinky orange colour, in just around this bit here. Tiny bit over the eyes, just the odd little strand. Not really too much there, just that bit there. Just a tiny bit, a few strands on the top of his nose here. And I'd say just a little bit at the top of the muzzle here. I missed a bit round the eye just there. Okay, and now I'm just going to work on intensifying those darker bits, particularly those two bits just above his eyes. So now I've got a brown ochre luminance pencil. I'm just going to continue to work up the intensity of colour here in these bits, and there'll be a couple of little bits elsewhere, not so much though as the previous colour. This is quite a warm colour, we won't have so much need for this because a lot of the dark places tend to be are a bit more in shadow on his face, so I'll use a different colour for those. It's mainly just these bits around the middle of his face here. Around his eyes. And now I've done that, I'm just going to put a little bit more on top, and this time I'm going to go for a Derwent Lightfast Sienna pencil, and this I just want to get at the bottom, a bit at the top here, and not quite so much on this one. This side's a little lighter, and then just the odd little light pressure stroke here, just to give a bit more variety within the tones of fur. Because the hairs all overlay each other, and the light's bouncing off it, it's creating lots of different tones of colour, and this is what really gives the depth to the picture. Around the eye there, and this bit here. I'm going to put a little bit just in this bit down the nose here. Just down here. Okay, you can see that's starting to create more variation in tone there. And then I've got a burnt sienna luminance here, and just for the really intense darker bits, I'm just going to add a touch. You don't need too much of this, just tiny little bits. And put a bit on that little dark line in the middle. And if there is any other tiny little bits of patches of hair, using a very, very light pressure though. And then I'm going to put just a little bit of this in within the edge of the hairline here, where we've got some shadow, and we will go over it with some blues and purples and greys and such like, but I'm just going to add a little bit of just the odd touch, just to give a bit more vibrance to the picture. In the top, not so much worried about this bit here, because that bit's more in shadow there, and we'll use cooler colours. So tiny bits, maybe just a teeny bit here in that area, and a tiny bit on the side of the nose there. Just a little bit here. Don't want too much there. Okay. And now what I want to do is go back. I've got a sepia 10% luminance pencil here, which is a nice pale grey colour, and I just want to add a little bit above his nose here. Again, using a very light pressure. I'm going to start by doing gentle little washes, but not filling the whole area in, leaving some of the very lightest tones to shine through. Look at the direction of the hair growth, it's on a slight angle here, so going around his nose to help give it some more shape. And then you'll have a couple of lines here where he's got a few little scars and marks. A little bit above his nose. Take a little bit into the side of his nose here. To mute it down a little bit, and then there's a line that's coming down his face here. So I'll wash a bit over that, and then on this side of his cheek, help fill in a few of those white patches that are showing through. And I'm just going to add a few little bits on his head here. Add a bit above his, few strands above his eye, let the lighter colour shine through. Yeah, and start adding a bit more here on this cheek, which is in a bit more shadow. And I'm using about pressure 2 at the moment. Now under his eye here as well, we can start bringing in a little bit of the greyer colours. Look at the markings. You can see obviously there are lighter bits shining through, so leave those for the moment. Keep checking your reference photo. There's that dark line there. And then the grey starts to come out into the longer hair here. And got a dark patch here. Just put some in over that and around it. And I'm going to just wash a little bit in this bit here, tone this bit down. Again, like we talked about earlier, it's balancing out your colours, or it might be the intensity dulling them down, bringing them out. It's applying those layers and then until you get the balance of the different tones and colours correct. So some of this grey sepia 10%, it's just helping to mute down slightly some of the intense colours that we just put on, just to make them a bit more realistic looking. Again, I don't want to put too much here because I like that colour there. Just going to add a tiny bit under the side of his nose and on that line just so we don't lose it. And then around his, got a little bit in here, not too much. Okay. Go. So what I want to do now is I just want to add a few darker bits just around the hairline here, the cheek, in this patch under his eye, here and here, and then just bring back in his mouth so we don't lose it here. I've got a light aubergine luminance pencil, which is a purple colour, and I want to use this as a complementary colour really to, and then we'll add some other colours over the top using, as we said before, using a variety of colours that you perhaps might not have necessarily thought of. It really helps to add some depth to the picture, so it doesn't look flat and boring. It helps to bring it to life a bit. Again, around here, just be careful with little strands so we can see the lighter colours shining through. And then on this side bit, I'm just going to wash a little bit in down this part of the face and then bring it out just slightly into that cheekbone there. Looking at the direction, I've got a bit of a curve so we can see the curve going on his face there. And then his eye, we will move on to doing the eye in a moment. Just gonna sketch that bit that comes down like that back in so we don't lose it. I'm going to start just putting a little bit of wash very lightly just in there, and then there's a bit coming off the side of it and down here, and where this little black scar is here. And this bit under the eye. And over this scar on his face. Just a tiny bit on the bottom of this edge here. And a few few strands that help to bring out the highlighted hairs above the eye. I don't want too much on his face, particularly just a tiny bit there, and then a bit on this area here. Just to the right of the eye here. And I also want to add a bit on this line coming down from the eye here. Just a little bit. Okay. Moving down, I'd add a little bit in this patch to the side of his nose. With a few hairs coming out into the nose area above just his nose here. Over some of those scars. And just a little bit along here. And then here I'm finding that actually I've lost a bit of the definition here, so I'm just going to relook and just carefully go around the outside of where it should be, just to make sure that we are coming in round in the right bits where the follicles are growing. So that's that dark bit there. Okay, and then his mouth comes up here, which we'll work on in a moment, but just so we've got an idea of where it is, so we don't end up losing it. Yeah, so here in a moment I shall show you how I can lighten that bit off there, just to get that back right again. We'll come back to that bit in a moment. So I'm now going to use a sepia 50% luminance, and just on these bits that are really in shadow around his hairline, just going to add a little bit in places. Can always come back and darken it up a bit more later if we need to. Just want to start getting a little bit of depth in. And down the side here, tiny bit out here. And under the eye, just to start plotting it in a bit and getting a bit of a base coat in there. On his skull, tiny bit just around here, on that line in his head. Remember, don't just draw a straight line, it is just the shadow where the hairs are lying. Little bit round the eye here. a little bit in the cheek, a few strands of hair, and build up this dark patch under his eye. And on these scars. And scratches and nicks in his face. Just put a touch on this dark bit around his mouth, just so we keep it ready to build up. A tiny bit around his nose. Okay. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of Payne's Grey 60% luminance over where I've been, but less of it, just in the really dark shadowed areas, which is mostly on this side of his face. So I don't want to go too dark, it's this bit under his eye. Start adding some of that in. And these scars and marks. A few little marks on his face. I'm going to put some of these starting to lose where we put some of these little follicles where the hairs are growing out, so I'm just going to carefully just lightly just pop those back in, just so we can keep track of where they are. We can come and finish them a bit later on. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to just lift out a little bit round here where I feel I've lost the shape a little bit, and I've gone a bit too far over with the darker colours. It should be rounder just there. So what I'm going to do is I've actually got a bit of blue tack here, and I'm just going to shape it a little bit, mould it, and then I'm just going to dab very gently to just try and lift a little bit of that colour back out again, so I'm happy with the shape of it. As you can see, it's looking a bit rounder now. I'm also, while I have this bit of blue tack in my hand, there are a few bits around here and in the nose where I feel that it's some of the highlights have got slightly lost. So if this happens, one of the methods you can use is to use some blue tack or putty rubber and just shape it so you've got a nice fine point, and then just very gently you can just stroke and lift some little patches out like this. If there's particular fine points, like little lines you want to lift, I will show you a bit later how to achieve that as well. At the moment I'm just lifting small areas, so my putty rubber will be fine for this job. So I'm just stroking in the direction of the hair. So it's almost like I'm drawing in with the rubber, which I personally quite like to do because I think you can achieve some nice effects from it. One of the other tools that I enjoy using to lift out hairs and highlights is an electric eraser, and we'll have a little look at that a bit later on. So just in any of those points where you feel perhaps it's just gone a little darker than perhaps you intended it to, or you just want to clean a little patch up, and then now's a good time just to have a little go. As I said, you can use don't think of the rubber as rubbing out mistakes. Think of using it as a tool, like a pencil, but it's lifting rather than putting down. There we go. Okay, so that's done a little bit of lifting out. We can obviously go back in at a later stage if there's any more that we feel we want to be doing. What I want to do now is, obviously we've been using a lot of the purples and greys and the orangey brown burnt ochre colours. I want to actually go back now to using a subtle shade of creamy yellow called Eggshell by Prismacolor, and I'm gonna start to just wash this. About pressure 2 I'm using at the moment, and I'm kind of washing with little backwards and forwards strokes, almost in a little well, not a circle, more of an oval shape in places. This should help to start blend some of the underlying colours together. I'm not going to go over those really dark areas. Again, you don't need to do the whole thing, you just want to, it's patchy, so there'll be bits like here where we've washed quite a bit, and then there'll be bits on the forehead where there might just be a few strands, and then other bits where you've got little clumps of hair together. Now this bit here, which I've currently left white, obviously isn't actually white, I'm just going to lie a very gentle wash of the eggshell over it. I'm going to put a little bit over this bit here, because just to blend it a bit more. over his eye. I'm just stroking again because you can see some of the hairs there, obviously. This whole patch here, I'm just doing odd stroke. Long hairs, don't forget to think about the length of your pencil marks. And as I'm coming down into the cheek a bit more, then a little bit more of a wash going on. And again, you can see the longer hairs here on the underneath his cheek, and then a bit more washed out here. Definitely want to add a bit over here where it's more of a yellow colour. And again, above his nose it's quite patchy, just add little bits. Washing over with a lighter colour really helps to start blend some of the colours together. Okay, so now we've done that, it's a good time to obviously check back with your reference photo to see what area needs to continue to be built up, if we feel we need any more different colours within the face. For me, looking at it, this area here in his cheek and below his eye, has got some grey in it, a bit more grey, so I want to work up that area a little bit, a few more of the individual hairs, make them stand out, and then at the top near the hairline, not too much, but there's a few little bits that are more grey. I just want to add a few bits of hair in there, just little tiny bits, and then a bit more in this dark area here, just to help the nose stand out a bit more. So I'm going to start by just, I've got a 50% French grey at the moment, and I'm just literally going to stroke just a little bit of hair. Remember to follow the line of the hair. They're not all going to go exactly uniform either. When you're doing hair, you have to kind of just switch your wrist movements to create lines going in slightly different directions. It's not like they will have just had a hairbrush. Their hair will be going in various directions. I just want tiny bits here just to try and help bring out some of those lighter colours, make them stand out more. And down into the nose, these markings here, and then it's this bit down here I feel is a bit more grey than we've got it, so just add a little bit, not too much. And this darker patch here, just stroke stroke a few of the hairs on. Just within his forehead here, I'm just going to add a few little bits just to break up this darker patch of hair, because it's not one solid colour. And the same here, just got a few little bits. Again, I'm using between a pressure 1 and 2, 1 in the lighter places, 2 in the slightly darker areas. Darken this bit off around the whiskers here.